I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program and discuss triple feature movie nights. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's film block that we call Better Than the Original. A sequel is a tricky thing to pull off. There are certain rules that filmmakers must follow in order to ensure a sequel's success. Most of these guidelines are widely accepted and include things like you must reestablish narrative from the first film, mix plot points up, but keep them familiar enough so fans still enjoy, and, of course, do not make the same movie over again. When the cocktail's ingredients are mixed perfectly, we get movies like Aliens and Godfather 2. Films that not only extend familiar stories, but enhance them as well. On the other side of the coin, ignoring these basic principles can have the opposite effect, and we end up with something like Caddyshack 2. Today's Grindhouse Institute block is a triple feature: 1987's Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, 1990's Gremlins 2, The New Batch, and the 1991 blockbuster Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Ash and his girlfriend Linda escape to a cabin in the woods to enjoy some alone time together. Their romantic weekend becomes a terrifying encounter when supernatural forces arise. Linda is taken by the invisible evil, leaving Ash to survive and discover the true power of the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead. Billy and Kate, survivors of the Kingston Falls Gremlin attack of 1984, got a fresh start living together in New York. Their new life hits a major roadblock when Billy is reunited with his old pal Gizmo, a cute little creature called a mogwai that comes with a certain set of rules. No bright lights, don't get it wet, don't feed it after midnight. None of these rules are followed. Pandemonium ensues. In 2029, Los Angeles is a blasted hellscape overrun with machines hunting the few surviving humans. The only thing standing in their way is John Connor. This bleak future is just around the corner, but as John's mother Sarah says, there's no fate but what we make. Two machines are sent back to 1991 to find John as a teenager, one to protect him and one to terminate him. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
Will the owner of the car with license number 1AG401 please remove it from the Clamp parking garage? Your car is old and dirty. Morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Dr. Silberman. How's the knee?
Welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster. Here with me is Jeremy Floyd.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you. We have a very special triple feature to discuss today. Jeremy and I were just talking about it, and I couldn't get over how excited I am about talking about and unpacking these films. The theme of today's episode are sequels that are better, arguably, than the original, than part one. And we are talking about three films that's one of them, arguably, someone might say, is a remake in a way. However, it does have two in the title, so it's being included in this. The three films that we'll be watching today, as I'm so stoked right now: Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn.
Calm down, buddy.
I'm trying. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Just got finished watching Gremlins yesterday and watched the other films 2 days before that. And like I've said, I can't believe I forgot how good these movies actually are.
Yeah, it's the normal idea is that there's a good movie that's made, and then they immediately try to do a quick cash in on a sequel, and the sequel sucks, and it's either too much of a rehash of the first one, but not getting all the things right that they got in the first one, or just totally blowing it in some other way. And while it's also interesting to have a sequel that's like kind of a totally different genre, like maybe Alien to Aliens type of thing.
Yep.
It is interesting to explore the same director.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could spread that out to even more people. It's like, not just the director, but also the rest of the cast and crew and everything else. But how they're able to pull it off well. And I would say, yes, you're right. Like in this case, definitely all of these movies, for my money, were better than the original.
Wow. Okay. So I did not say that. You said that, and I do.
said it.
Yeah. You're the one that says this. So I guess that's something we should discuss. I mean, since you brought it up, we can discuss that now. Now, I'll give you that Evil Dead 2 is a better film than Evil Dead, hands down. I also see Evil Dead as being, very ahead of its time, and Evil Dead 2 is very ahead of its time with a bunch of money. Like, Sam Raimi had some freedom to work and to really show off what he could do. In general, that film, as well as all three of these, they're all clinics in editing and shot coverage, in my opinion. Evil Dead, I'll bring up a specific thing, is we see Ash grab a shovel because he's about to bury his now dead girlfriend.
Right.
And he jams it into the ground, and then there's a zero cut from the shovel, and it just kind of clears frame, and she's already in the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's already like this really quick move. And all these movies had that.
Well, he did that almost the exact same cut in Evil Dead 1, right?
I think so. I think there's a lot of that stuff there. And I think that's, again, why sequels are interesting, because a lot of beats are matched, and there are some fan service things that need to be hit, because, it wouldn't make sense. Like T2 has a ton of them. It's got I'll Be Back, and it's like kind of the same sequence from I'll Be Back 2. He comes in with a car, but instead of driving his car through the police station, destroying an officer that's sitting behind the desk, this one he's just coming to save Sarah and John from getting pinned down in that elevator shaft or elevator.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna argue on Terminator. And
That Terminator 1 is better?
I still think Terminator 1 is better than Terminator 2.
False.
Yeah,
But I just went with the Dwight Schrute response.
Yeah, false.
Yeah.
Black bears. The reason I think that personally is because I think Terminator is more of a tech sci-fi horror film than anything. And I feel like that jives with me more than the popcorn blockbuster action film. Although T2 is the boilerplate for how you make that kind of movie. Like, that is perfection on so many levels.
T2 is, you're saying. Yeah.
T2, yeah. But I love the first Terminator, especially for, the budget that they were working with at the time, the constraints that they had. But that was, a Stan Winston coming in and, he was a very talented makeup and effects guy, and like you could see his work there, and then the work that changed and became T2, you just see that, like, and that's what you're talking about, people returning from the cast and crew as well to, see this story continue. And I think that's where you see some success.
Kind of take it to the next level.
Yeah.
In actually all of these instances.
Evil Dead especially.
Well, so I think maybe what's important to point out is all three of these examples, at least, and I'll circle back around to your Terminator defense.
Oh, I've said all I had about that. That's all good.
Okay, cool. But all three of these take the tone and sort of even sometimes the genre of the original movie and twist it into a different place.
Totally.
And they all do it really successfully. Now, okay, it's not just a continuation of the story like Godfather 1 to Godfather 2 or something like that. The first Gremlins is, a straight horror movie.
Horror film, yeah.
With, touches of humor and sort of levity, but it is pretty much a horror movie.
Sure.
And you often forget because it's like, oh, it's set at Christmas and some of these things. Evil Dead 1, also just a straight horror movie, almost no comedy. And Terminator 1 is often remembered as, it's film noir. Oh, it's, what do they call it? It's like...
Tech noir?
Tech noir. It's, it's an action movie because there's, car chases and stuff in it. There's lots of shotguns going off and whatever. But Terminator 1 is a straight up horror movie.
It's a horror movie. I agree.
It's just, it's Halloween, but with a robot instead of a masked killer.
Yep.
And, Terminator 2, changes that genre. It's not so much horror anymore, even though there's sort of some of those elements still in it.
Still some very grisly violence, and they didn't pull any punches really with the violence in that film. It's great.
No, that's for sure. And yeah, I mean, like, the even the opening sequence or that dream flashback with LA getting annihilated. But even though, yeah, some of those horror elements are still there, it's more, action and, even at certain points, sort of straight drama, which is interesting.
And Gremlins became a cartoon. Gremlins 2,
Gremlins 2.
And it has no qualms about saying, "Hey, this is going to be a cartoon," by giving you a cold open cartoon to start the film, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Now I'm watching a live action cartoon," versus throwing the gremlin in the microwave, and then the big attack at the end when that thing comes out of the water or jumps into that pool, and it's terrifying. That first movie, there are terrifying moments in it. I remember my dad taking me out of the theater when we were going to see it,
really?
when the microwave scene happened, when the gremlin gets blown up in the microwave. Yeah, and my mom reminds me about that all the time, because I told her we were doing this movie on this episode, and she goes, "You better bring that up." And I'm like, "Okay, I will," so there you go.
All right, well, there you go, Brian's mom.
But yeah, it's a totally different movie.
No, exactly. And, Gremlins 2, Evil Dead 2, they take a little more
it's a comedy.
Humorous approach to comedy. The, Gremlins, of course, cranks that up to, 9 million, and it's
successfully 9 million.
Yeah, exactly. It's, it's completely insane, and, it's just,
there's not a moment in that movie that there isn't a gag that it's like everything was so planned out with something. Something was gonna happen. And the cameos in that movie, like Christopher Lee and Gomez Adams, John Astin, like, come on, like, and he was kind of a small character, but he's the one that started off all the events of the mayhem, like, it was really cool.
I guess arguably Clamp bulldozing Chinatown started this off, but yeah.
So who do you think they were referencing when they were referencing Clamp?
Well, he's very obviously an amalgamation of both Trump and Ted Turner.
Yes,
because he has that
news network
sort of, and cable media conglomerate,
right?
And then real estate mogul with bad taste and bad ideas, and it's funny, supposedly that character was written to be a lot more hateable, but
not with that performance.
Yeah, not with
and everything that they would tell him.
Not with John Glover playing it.
John Glover's great.
Also, just like he, part of it is that he's just such a lovable bimbo that you kind of can't help but like him, and then that really is most of it. Although some of those other things like where he recognizes the stakes in humanity sometimes, and then also gets sucked into wanting to be a hero. I guess that's more of the
one of the SWAT members.
Yeah.
He led the charge in at the end. Couldn't get the door open. They tried all the.
Like that would probably be closer to what the character was probably written as, and then some of the humanity was probably injected by John Glover to sort of make him into his own character, and not so much whatever the inspiration for that character.
Right. Let's go back to Evil Dead 2 real quick. We talked about this, being a pseudo sequel in a way, more of a remake than anything, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, especially watching it now, and I just watched Evil Dead recently, the first one, but watching part 2, I mean, there are, like you said, shot for shot, some of the same things that Raimi wanted to pull off in the first one that he finally got to. It seems he could see his entire vision, I feel like, in this film. I feel like this movie took that story and really expanded the size of it more to the fact that we now know where these Deadites are coming from. There's a whole prophecy around this. Like, he clearly wanted to tell this as more of a cinematic universe. I know it's kind of a buzz term right now, but really it became that, right? It became the Evil Dead universe where, Ash does go back in time. He's the actual prophet, and I don't know how they couldn't tell it was him with a little drawing of a guy with the flannel standing up there. I was like, oh, that you don't know that's you? No, okay, no, but
at that point he hadn't put the
chainsaw
on his arm. So
exactly,
who has a chainsaw on the arm?
But again, a movie that's full of gags, right? There's not one scene in that movie either that there's not something mechanical, bloody, animatronic happening. Something is off. Really strong effects. I love the miniature work in this film. I thought it was incredible. I love the mirror shot, which, so again, Chrissy, my fiance, saw this for the first time. She loved this movie, by the way. She thought it was incredibly fun. She's like, that was awesome.
Now, is she a horror geek like you or no?
Not like me, but I think I'm, turning her into one.
Yeah.
because I'm showing her the good ones. I'm not showing her any of the shit,
Yeah.
But there, so I wanted to say this in the Blu-ray that I watched during the menus to, get into the film. They have some video playing of the movie, to kind of preview the film. And they gave away the mirror gag. And I always thought that was a pretty scary moment, like, because it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
He's got his hand, they don't really cut away, and then all of a sudden he's in the mirror, like, right face to face, with the, right. What do they call it? The other Shemp?
The fake Shemp, yeah.
Fake Shemps, yeah. I mean, tell me that Raimi and those guys did not have a blast making that movie. Both of them, I'd say, but this one in particular.
Yeah. I'm sure this one was a lot less stressful than the previous one, but it also seemed like there was a lot of stuff that barely came together.
They went for it. They really went for it.
Reading about some of the the process of how they made it, and man, it was just they put everything on screen, I should say, and it was just barely coming together type of thing, even with more of a budget like this, right?
I liked learning more in that movie about the historian looking into the Necronomicon, and I felt like this movie more...
How was that portrayed in the first one? I don't remember.
I believe the group, so there's obviously it's just Ash and is it Linda that go in Evil Dead 2. They're the ones that go to the cabin, but in the first one it's a car full of people. There's 5 of them. 5 of them.
I remember that.
And so they just find the recorder and play the recorder out loud, and when the recording plays at the Kandar and all that, that's when the Deadites come back, which I don't think they're Deadites in that movie, but what they become Deadites. Mm-hmm. But in this one, they gave more context to how they found this radio. Ash plays it, but there's more backstory there. Plus, we get to see some of that, like I think there's a flashback when it goes back to some of that. Plus, we get to meet that historian's daughter, which kind of, fleshes him out more in our world. And we actually get to see him as a spirit, later on with the floating Wizard of Oz head,
No.
You could tell he was very influenced by Wizard of Oz and some of the effects in the Wizard of Oz. Like, I think Raimi really is leaned into that for some of them, especially the eyes and the mouth in the house when you see the house from the outside and it becomes like a face.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like,
I think you know at the very end with the heart with eyes and teeth monster coming through the door.
Very Lovecraft, right?
Yeah. Well, so that's what I was about to say. Like a lot of this stuff is very Lovecraftian. I
mean, Necronomicon for sure.
Necronomicon, the whole Book of the Dead. It's very much like in what do you call it? The Call of Cthulhu, where the whole thing is that this book and the sort of lost history of it, can unleash these horrors upon the world. And I mean, it's very much sort of taking from that set of ideas, that world, and twisting it into his own creation.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where Raimi kind of gets it right, where some other people often fall short of it.
Yeah.
That's
hard work to translate, though. I mean, a lot of the stuff that they talk about are things that can't be seen. Makes it a little hard to put on film.
Exactly. Like, in the story of Color Out of Space, it's like a color that cannot be described, or whatever.
It's not on the spectrum.
It's like, well, how the hell would you put that on screen?
Also, the smells. It's a lot about smell and a lot about how people are feeling actually in that moment. You can't really.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing, is like that he kind of gets this right in the sense that, like, you need to have the characters and the audience kind of plunged into this, sense of madness, sense of like not having, level ground to stand on.
And that's kind of where Ash ends up, like, at least climactically in the film. He is completely out of his fucking mind.
Yeah, exactly. Like, losing his mind, all that stuff. in this one, they do it by doing things like, you don't know what the rules are exactly. Like he gets possessed in the very first 10 minutes or whatever, and then he's not, and then he's back, and then he's not, and then sometimes the monsters pop out, and sometimes they do this, sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they look like people, and sometimes they're creatures or trees.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be anything, really.
And you have to sit and stew in this whole jambalaya of stuff that's happening. But what that normally does is that it strips out the ability to sort of really have a plot. And this movie is pretty much like that. The plot's extremely simple. It's like they show up to a cabin, shit happens, and then it's the end.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, almost no plot. Like they're not trying to get somewhere. There are no goals that are happening.
It's survival.
What? Yeah, exactly. But it's not like, well, if Ash could only get out of this with one hand intact, and it's like, well, why is he still? It's like you don't have a sense of trajectory or the future. It's just this immediacy. But what he does so well is like while you're stuck in this, he makes it like extremely entertaining, and there's this humor and madness, whatever. And this is sort of like getting to the heart of like why this one works so much better for me than the first one, which is being able to take that sort of sense of humor, the absurdity, the sort of bonkers way that they would put the whole thing together. It allows you to engage with this lack of plot and get you into the story about madness and sort of losing a grip on things. You're able to go on this journey with them and not get bored, which is what happens in some of the even modern Lovecraft adaptations for me anyway, where I was like, okay, well, what are they doing? Are they going to leave? What's going on?
Because isolationism is part of that.
Like, well, where's this going? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
And in this one, like, it's sort of unrelenting. It's just part of it that makes it successful. And then the other part is that, like, it takes this humorous turn. So you're not sitting there wondering and like, well, why is he? And why aren't they? And like, it's entertaining enough to then be able to get you to that point where you're kind of slipping into the character's madness.
Yeah.
And that's embodied in probably my favorite scene in the movie, which is when, I think Ash wakes up in the chair and he like looks up and sees the, mounted, deer head or whatever, that starts laughing and just going nuts. And like, and then the whole,
everything.
all the windows and all the lamps and everything just start like going crazy. And like, and he like backs up and he starts laughing with them. And then like, he looks over and sees the lamp bobbing up and down, so he starts, doing the whole like dance, and it was very much like it felt like something you'd see in like a Terry Gilliam film, but even like crazier.
Yeah,
I mean it's on the level of like Hell's a Poppin', which of course was certainly one of Joe Dante's most inspirational films, which he took a lot out of to do Gremlins 2 as well.
I was blown away by that scene, actually, the one that you're talking about. I think that Bruce Campbell established himself as a real legitimate actor in this movie because people saw that he was doing stuff that was outrageous. Doing that flip that he flipped himself over, clearly that was him, that wasn't someone else. Bashing himself over the head with plates. Give me back my hand!
You bastards! You dirty bastard! Give me back my hand!
Just hilarious. Now I'm wondering if, like, at one point, like, people were like, "Is this supposed to be funny?" Because they're coming from the first movie, right? But this is a few years after, I guess. But still, I mean, people expecting the dreaded horror of Evil Dead, this is slapstick humor. This is Three Stooges on screen,
Yeah, like, man, like, think about when he was close to a window that was all boarded up, and it looked very much like Night of the Living Dead. Hands just kind of burst through and were pulling him. But then he wasn't just trying to break away, but they were like bashing his head into the wood. And it was full on Three Stooges style. Yeah,
very much. I think they even added a few little sound effects in there too. Also, I thought it was interesting that, and if you watch it again, there's an evolution of the color of blood in that movie. It starts out red, like it's human, and it turns into black and green and blue by the end of it. Like
Right.
all of
I
a
forgot
sudden,
about the blue one. I remember the other ones, but yeah,
the blue one it looks pretty good on screen actually. But it was just like, it was interesting to see that each of these creatures, I guess narratively, like they could be a different species of thing, right? These creatures could be from anywhere, so their blood could be any color. They don't even have to have blood, but whatever that is. But the black tar coming out of Linda, you know, and his face just getting getting trashed. There's just some amazing stuff in that movie. And you know, I think this movie benefited from stop motion animation over current modern CG. I think that has had a creepier feel to it, especially the Dance of the Dead, you know, with the headless girl and everything. I thought that had such an odd, you know, it's got that weird jittery feel to it that I don't think you could achieve, you know, now with some super smooth CG. You know, it wouldn't have that same effect.
Yeah, you know, that scene's a little odd. You know, just considering like the point of view that we're watching it from, but you know, it's you know, it's supposed to be really just, you know, bizarre and kind of, you know, funny and funky. And yeah, you totally strip a lot of that life to it out when you're doing just really smooth, you know, slimy CG that, you know, they take, you know, animation keyframes from a different show and just like copy and paste it there, but you know, put their own, it's like, you know, the video game rendering engine, they crank these things out. But what is it about physical effects, even if they're
not great,
you know, not great, and you can see that they are not in the world that the characters are in or whatever, like what is it about them that like still gives it more sort of life and authenticity than
a physical model that's getting beaten up to shit, you know, like something that's real that you can touch in real life. We know that as the difference on screen. I think that's why it's more effective. And I think T2 has a blend of both, which I wish movies would get back to, because, you know, if we go on T2, some of the effects there, like the way that the head would split open on the T1000, and he would have different, you know, modes when he blew up from the grenade launcher, the thumper getting stuck in his stomach there. Like, those are all physical machines that they built, you know, like animatronic, and it felt so real. It felt so tangible.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's part of it too, is like that you know, you can just, you know, feel the weight of it more or something. You know, it still keeps you a little closer grounded to what the reality of these things are. But man, how funny the part you're talking about where he gets that little grenade
I love it,
into him, and he is, you know, a big splashing swirl.
It's like the Thing.
But also like the sort of, you know, headless Henrietta.
Yes.
In Evil Dead 2. I was like, oh man, that is an interesting connection I would have never made. Also, you know, I was starting to get worried while we were watching I was watching Evil Dead 2, and it was like, you know, this one feels like the odd man out. It's not exactly a sequel. It's kind of a remake. You know, it doesn't have as many connections to the other movies. But like that connection where it's like, I don't know, just like the look of it and the, you know, the sort of snake head Henrietta that looks very much like you know, Beetlejuice at one point, or perhaps the other way around, because I think this was first.
Yeah.
But that, and then also, I guess, the sort of time travel paradoxes that happen in Evil Dead 2 as well as Terminator 2.
They're almost the same movie.
Yeah, exact same. See?
I think Terminator 2 is a remake of Evil Dead 2.
I can't see a single difference. Yeah, exactly.
Let's jump into T2, though.
Sure.
You know, I you know, talking about sequels, and you know how a sequel should at least mirror somewhat the original film that it's, you know, the sequelizing. And I wanted to pull out some of them, and that I didn't catch in the previous times I've seen the movie, but I caught him this time. The interrogation with Sarah Connor in the hospital by Dr. Silverman is the same exact interrogation that he gives to Kyle Reese. Now, remember I mentioned to you that there was 2 plot holes that I had I wanted to discuss on this? This is one of them. So Dr. Silverman still doesn't believe what Kyle Reese was talking about, even though minutes after he walked out of the police station in the first movie, the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, came in and fucked that entire place up. Killed every police officer in that building trying to get Sarah.
Right.
Dr. Silverman still doesn't, or he knew about this because it's on the news. It's a police report, right? The whole police station he was just at got blown away.
And the police explicitly, bring it up later.
Right. Again,
so
yeah.
He would have been aware of that.
Because they got pictures of him at the Galleria, right? Like, oh, we saw this guy on some security footage, and he didn't age very much, but there, whatever. But Dr. Silverman still questions Sarah with the same exact story, word for word.
Yeah.
July, whatever, 1997 is going to be a real bad fucking day, okay? All that stuff.
Or anyone without 2 million sunblock.
There you go. What a good line, right? So that's my first plot hole is Dr. Silverman should probably maybe take this seriously, especially after what just happened to him in 1984.
Well, let's pause on that one then before we go on to the next one. Okay, first of all, they established pretty clearly that Dr. Silverman is not doing any of this stuff in good faith. You know what I mean? He's definitely just using his power over her, and it seems as though he has his career in mind, and he wants to she's
write a
this
book
wonderful,
about her and
test subject. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he is sort of the child pulling wings off a fly and torturing her, and he gets a certain glee from that,
like the guy from Hannibal or Silence of the Lambs. That same I can't think of his name, but that scientist, that doctor.
And then also just overall the story that she tells is so fantastical. He would have to not believe it in order to continue living his life or whatever. Or deny it in a certain way to do that. So I don't know. I could see both a sort of cynical and practical way in which he would, not believe her and not, think there's any credence to it, and have him be able to still go throughout his daily life or whatever. Especially because of it seems again like they never really quite nailed this down for sure, but it definitely feels like he was gonna stake his career on the exploration of Sarah, because he takes the whole visiting medical team over and like, this is my prized subject.
Take a look.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
she
Dr.
believes
Silverman,
in the craziest shit in the world.
How's the knee?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I'll mark that up as I'm right and you're wrong. Moving
perfect.
on to the next one. The Terminator has detailed files on human anatomy, right? That makes him a better killer. These are lines directly from the film.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know what tears are.
No, he just doesn't know why they come out. Until the very end, when he learns now why he cries, but it's something I cannot do.
Well, it's he doesn't have the emotion. Like, that's really what it is. But the tear duct should be something that if they were creating a realistic human robot that needed to pass certain tests, like they explained in the first movie, you couldn't tell that they were robots. They're covered in human skin. Well, maybe they should have, fixed the tear ducts and maybe give him a reason to cry, because that's a very human thing to do.
Maybe, but as you can tell, they totally failed that test or whatever by making Arnold one of these things that are like supposed to pass as human, and it's like this guy who is just inhumanly large and strong and intimidating and also unintelligible, at least in English,
and fully naked.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one more, and this one's more just a flub. And I am not dogging on T2 by any means. I'm just bringing these up more for comedic effect.
That's fun.
Sarah says that there are 215 bones in the human body after she breaks Dr. Silverman's arm.
And you looked it up?
There's only 206 bones in the human body. Man.
Wow.
But still, let's talk about the clinic and editing that this movie is. One, I wanted to bring one in particular when the interrogation is happening with Sarah and the doctor, and he says straight up, "You don't believe that the company covered it up, do you?" When talking about the monster or the robot that was crushed in that hydraulic press. Mm-hmm. And then, boom, we're right in Cyberdyne. And we're walking with Miles Dyson to go look at the actual arm and everything. I mean, that's service, and that's service in the story that you had already established in the first film. And I thought that was one of the most brilliant cuts in a movie.
Yeah, that was good. You can kind of take that to almost any place in this, just in terms of like, how well paced all sort of the scenes are, the action scenes, as well as just the more mundane scenes, and even the stuff where it's like you're kind of just setting up that John Connor's step family or whatever is like kind of remote. It's like, you could see, okay, you could argue maybe you just cut that out, but like, it was done so well that it set those characters up really fast. And then the next time we see him, the T-1000's with him, and the next time we see him after that, they're dead.
Your foster parents are dead.
Yeah.
That's an awesome one, too.
How's Wolfie?
What's your dog's name?
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's that woman is from Aliens. She was one of the soldiers from Aliens.
Hey, Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man? No. Have you?
Aliens is also great. I guess James Cameron knows how to do a sequel.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote Rambo 2, which is another genre changer from the first one, right? Like, totally different movie. This one, he wrote Rambo 2, First Blood. First Blood Part 2, sorry. Rambo, First Blood Part 2.
Wow, didn't know that.
Here's my connection to Gremlins in T2. Mm-hmm. The security guard working in the hospital. And, I thought it was interesting because in Gremlins 2, then I found out how they did the effect where the T-1000 was looking at himself as the security guard. And I was like, exactly. Those guys are twins.
Right.
And they had much more of a substantial role in Gremlins 2, but still he had one of the best kills best deaths in the movie by far with the poker through the eye. Oh, and he got the cup. The cup was, oh man, it was just great.
It's my lucky day. That's great, Lois.
How about a beer?
Exactly. But I think that's also sort of one of the things that we were kind of touching on earlier with, like, this movie, I don't know, was one of the harbingers of CG and sort of blockbuster movies and everything like that. But other than maybe those like those 6 or 7 shots, there are a lot of practical effects being done with they had those twins there. It's not in the movie, but there was a sort of an extended scene right after they escape from the mental institution. They go to the garage and she's like pulling out the bullets and the thing, and at one point they look in the mirror and they do the same gag out of Evil Dead 2 where it's like the lead actors are supposed to be inside of the mirror, which is not a mirror, and then they have
Linda Hamilton's sister.
Exactly. Linda Hamilton's sister, who apparently, at the time at least, it looked a lot like her. Mm-hmm. They do all this stuff that is still very practical. Obviously, all of the, helicopter flying around and, like, that multiple, I guess, 18-wheeler, semi-trucks, like, exploding and doing kinds of crazy things.
Unbelievable. I hadn't seen this movie in a long time. And I watched it a lot when it first came out. Like, this was my jam for a long time. But man, like when the T-1000 spots that 18-wheeler or that semi, makes a run for it, and you just see the guy driving by. The door opens, you don't even see what happens, and the guy is just flung. And the way he hits the ground, man, I'm like, that motherfucker broke his knees. I don't care, how padded up that guy was or whatever, but that was a real jump or a real toss from that truck,
right?
And it's brutal. It's like you could feel that, man. I
like coming out of the Galleria or whatever that was. Yeah,
probably one of the best chase scenes in a movie. That scene alone, that was incredible.
And I was also thinking, like, man, like how impressive was the stunt with like the liquid nitrogen truck? He jumps off the back of that one truck onto the cab of the semi truck.
Drive.
Gets on one knee and just like shoots 1,000 rounds into the face of the T-1000.
So awesome.
You know, reaches in, grabs the wheel, jackknifes the truck, turns it on its side, and it's like, oh man,
he rolls up and over it too, like he has to go up opposite
exactly
of the truck
as it sort of switches axes, and then you would imagine, or I mean, you don't even have to imagine. You've seen it in several movies since then, where it's like they have set pieces that with the ability to sort of do anything, and what they come up with just is nowhere near as sort of inventive as that sequence. Like, I guess that's the other thing is like the escalating set pieces in this, just each one just gets even crazier.
You're just constantly turning up the volume on this movie the whole time you're watching it. And that end sequence doesn't end. You're from the chase with that little S10 Chevy truck that they're driving away from the T-1000 into the lead plant. He then freezes from the liquid nitrogen, melts from the hot lead that's being poured all around him, reforms, and then they have to fucking book it again. It's like they took the first Terminator movie, he had different modes.
Actually, that whole sequence started, essentially after the Dyson thing. It's like, they get to Cyberdyne,
it's like
and
the ends
15
minutes.
Exactly, to the very end of the movie.
It's like, I think that's Act 3 is that chase, literally from Dyson, because Dyson drops the bomb or drops the on the marker on the plunger, whatever that was, that weight, and like that's how he gave up. And then from then on, that movie doesn't stop running at full blast. But again, like it's a sequel, and so the Terminator in the first movie had different phases, right? Like he had his untouched phase. And then he had the one where all of the hair was blown off his face because he was in the fire, and then his face started getting screwed up, so he had to start taking out his eye, and then by the end of it he was just the endoskeleton, and then by the very end of it he was just half of an endoskeleton. So they had like all these different phases of the Terminator, and they brought that into this one, and matched a lot of those beats, but did it to the nth degree compared to the first movie.
Oh, you just reminded me. Sorry to totally divert your enthusiasm on that, but I totally agree with what you're saying. But you reminded me when we were.
Are you raining on my parade right now?
something like that. When we got to the steel foundry, and he's getting his ass kicked by the T-1000, he had his arm ripped off, and he was crawling with one hand on that metal grate.
Yes.
And I was like, oh man, there's another connection to Evil Dead 2. It looked very similar when he's crawling across the kitchen floor.
See, again, it's the remake. It's it's a remake of Evil Dead 2.
I guess we've discovered that Terminator 2 is actually a sequel to Evil Dead 2.
No one would think that this podcast would bring up anything new.
We did it.
We come up with that.
We did it. Yeah. And also, just to go back to your ideas of things that that don't work, or plot holes, are totally unrealistic. Like the most unrealistic thing about this movie was that there was a functioning steel plant in America.
Yeah, where the hell was that? Where did they end up? Is that in Long Beach somewhere?
They had to travel back in time somewhere to get there.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, I kind of wondered that too. Rewatching it again, I'm like, where the hell are they right now? But it didn't matter. It was like just put them in a new arena with brighter colors and neonish, like that bright orange, mixed with that like dark blue that he's got. Cameron really can, like, those movies look fantastic.
Yeah, the look of this, like, top to bottom was just, awe-inspiring. It actually, like, especially like I think one of the most stylistic parts. It's almost has that sort of Michael Mann quality where he's able to be expressionistic and realistic at the same time. And is the mental institution, the way it's lit at night in particular, was
geometric and like sharp angles and stuff.
Yeah, and there's there's really harsh shadows along the walls and whatever. The look of the entire movie was actually a lot better than I remember. I remember it being, agree. Pretty utilitarian and just like, it's like that's not what you remember the movie for. But man, the cinematography was awesome in this.
Really awesome. So let's move on to Gremlins 2.
Let's do it.
Let me tell you, for the longest time, I always had Gremlins up there as a better movie, and now I think Gremlins 2 is a much more fun movie. I think it's more the fact that I'm older now and don't need to have horror, thrown in my face all the time. But this was the perfect mix, very Evil Dead 2-ish, perfect mix of gore and, creepy scenes with extreme cartoon antics and animations and whatever the hell else it was. But this movie...
And satire.
I want... Oh, absolutely. I mean, with Clamp's development, where China gets oriented. It was like...
Yeah.
It was the most, racist garbage. And it was like you could tell that they were trying to say that this guy was completely detached from, regular human life. This guy is clearly up in his ivory tower somewhere, Yeah. But yeah, I mean, from the get-go, you've got some of the best character actors. Robert Picardo is Clamp's right-hand man, and Robert Picardo is in
Who's
everything.
Generously given half a day off at the end of the movie.
Thank you, sir. 1 half day off. Thank you.
That's very generous. Thank you, sir.
They are very generous. Thank you.
And also, I guess, gets to lay pipe on a gremlin at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So we could skip to that. Let's skip to that real quick. No, that's fine. This is something I really wanted to bring up. And, there's been, Zach Galligan has always been pushing for it. He wants it to happen so much, but there's always been talk of a Gremlins 3. Never happened, though. Mostly because Dante's like, nah, I can't do this again. He went from, I guess Gremlins 1 was a real pain in the ass to work on. The animation, the animatronics never worked and the puppets never worked. And then in this one, he blew that stuff out of the water, right? I think he brought in probably 10 effects houses to create Gremlins for this movie and to do gags and things like that. But they've always been pushing for this third one, and that's the perfect link to the third one. That's the one gremlin that survives, is the female gremlin.
Yeah.
And if he's protecting her and he becomes
Gizmo,
the bad guy,
so.
and he's trying to get gremlins to repopulate, I think that would be a really cool storyline.
Yeah, for me, it's just like Terminator 2, I don't want another Gremlins.
Terminator 2 ended, though.
They landed it on the best possible way to do it, and it's okay, I think we're done with this story. Yeah. And his face was just okay.
Yeah, he's like, I guess.
Sure, why not?
How amazing was the brain gremlin, though?
Yeah, Tony Randall.
I believe that thing was talking the entire time. I was not pulled out of that for a second. It's so well animated. I love it. What a cool thing to write in. And I mean, obviously taking it to further limits. How do we create new types of gremlins? Well, let's put some strange laboratory inside this building where they're doing genetic modification on things like vegetables and fruits. And then instead, all the gremlins start eating this stuff and become...
Are you talking about at the Splice O Life? Designer jeans?
Run by Christopher Lee and the Terminator 2 twins.
Yeah.
I love that Christopher Lee is in this movie and he plays it so
We're
funny.
going to have to cut you open.
I have the flu. I already have the flu. He wanted some other diseases.
Rabies. I already have rabies.
I mean, you could tell, and so you've got Christopher Lee, you've got Gomez, John Astin, Gomez Adams in there. Obviously Dante was pulling out all of his fan cards, right? As a filmmaker that probably had a budget, and obviously Gremlins was an incredibly popular movie, so he probably had carte blanche on however this movie was going to be, produced. And he's like, well, I want to put some of my favorite characters in there.
Yeah, exactly. And supposedly that was the whole key to this movie, was that Gremlins 1 came out in 84, and this movie was 90. Man, apparently they had tried to get it off the ground for a really long time, and they couldn't do it. And they had gone through a ton of different ideas for it, and then the studio came back sort of begging Dante to get on board, and they're like, you can just do whatever you want, just get us a movie that has gremlins in it, and you can do whatever you want. And I guess he is able to take that to the limit. And in a way, well, I think for me, The Burbs is his best film. Like this one's
Great
up
movie.
there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of returning people from all his movies. They must love working with him.
Yeah, for sure.
Dick Miller comes back,
Robert Picardo.
Robert Picardo,
a ton of his
he was in
movies.
Inner Space.
He
played
was
the cowboy.
werewolf in The Howling.
Yeah.
He was one of the...
Dante's got such a cool filmography.
Yeah.
He's got the horror movies in there. Like clearly he was a fan of movies. I even like Matinee. I think Matinee is a great film. I think he did that, right?
Yeah, he did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was a great film. I wanted to talk about some of the characters in this, specifically the drunk food host, who was hands down my favorite
microwave cooking show.
When she's like, yeah, exactly, it was all microwave stuff, and she's like, when I make this bologna and bean dip roll-ups. And every time she cooks, she has to put booze in her thing.
Yeah.
2 shots of vodka.
But all she does is put a little splash in the food and just fills up her cup every time with Jameson. And she's pouring direct Jameson into like pasta sauce. Like it's
into microwave bologna and bean dip.
It's so funny. And then she's actually given she's given another recipe at the end to the Futterman. She's like, oh, you just put a thin layer of processed cheese food on it. Murray Futterman's wife looks at her. He's like, Murray, that's your favorite. He's like, oh God.
Man, Dick Miller was so great in this.
Awesome, man. But yeah, I think I like all the variation of all the Gremlins too. I mean, I don't think this is like Return of the Jedi where they were trying to sell toys. I think this was literally a sequel trying to up the ante of the first one. And we already saw that, once Gizmo gets wet, other Gremlins pop up, or other Mogwai pop up, and they're all dicks, right? They're all like copies of a copy kind of thing, almost like Multiplicity. They're just never that good or never as nice as the first one. But then once they eat after midnight, that's when shit really goes south. But I have a question. When is after midnight?
Yeah. Well, that's what they were sort of sending up in the movie itself, while like all the the TV station engineers were like, well, wait a minute, what if you got something stuck in your teeth and it comes out? Now you didn't technically eat. And he's like, well, what if you're on a flight and you pass through time zones and there is no midnight? Well, it's always midnight somewhere. And the guy just gets eaten as he's asking these stupid questions on a Gremlins movie. It's like,
I mean, that's very
the
self-aware,
point is,
right?
don't ask these questions. Who cares?
Good call. I love that.
Yeah, it's so good.
That's funny.
But yeah, I there were so many little things where the movie is is such like deep and biting satire. And what's crazy is that like it got to the point where it was like, oh man, some of this stuff is like hitting too close to home, and it's like as if Dante just like time traveled to now. And then went back in time and just made a documentary about it. It's like, just all that stuff with like the sort of like, that scanner of the employees and like the authorized art and all that crap.
Mr. Peltzer.
Like, how Picardo like finds Henry, what's his name, smoking, and he's like. He just like fires him remotely.
God. That's another great cameo there.
Like,
and he doesn't say anything. He's just that little that face he makes.
He's like, you lose all your medical benefits. That's right. And he's just like gleefully just getting rid of this guy.
Loves firing people.
Oh,
this
man.
is an unauthorized piece of art on your wall here. Yeah. The Clamp building has spent many millions of dollars putting priceless art on the walls. It was like a picture of a square.
He's like, this is not a $200 million flea market. But everything's like authorized this and that, and like the technology is just like so fucked and nothing works. But what's so crazy is like it was like kind of really hitting me this time around watching it, because I had seen it a couple months ago. They had a screening at the Egyptian, and man, oh man, that
must have been fun.
Made me sort of turn the corner on I think I had the same opinion you did, where it was like, oh, Gremlins 1 is probably the better one. And then watching it with a crowd again as an adult, like getting a lot of these jokes aside from the sort of very obvious slapstick jokes.
Right.
Like
the doctor's name is Dr. Catheter.
Yeah.
And they say it twice, but just very like Dr. Catheter. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and as a kid, you don't know what that means, or you're just like, yeah, whatever, and it's just like an evil doctor. But in that setting, it was amazing. Like, the movie kind of like leapfrogged the original one for me in that screening. But also, like, while I was watching it this time, it was wild because in the idea that maybe Dante traveled to the future, it's like Dr. Catheter is sitting there like trying to like spread the plague and all this stuff.
Right.
Then 5 minutes later, they're doing Zoom calls on their like phones. And, like,
nothing in this place works.
Oh yeah, and then like. Yeah, like, oh man, that thing where it's like the office lights turn off if you don't move, like that happens.
You had to jump around.
Oh man, it's the worst. Oh man.
I was gonna bring up that the chain of events in Gremlins 2 reminded me of Return of the Living Dead. So Gomez Adams, the janitor, sprays a little bit of water and then hits Gizmo, and then from there's like this chain of events, just like how basically the humans like, well, all right, let's burn the bodies. Okay, but that's going to create the fumes that creates the acid rain and all this stuff. And it was a very similar thing in how they just kept getting bigger and more ferocious, and then they obviously ate later on and became cocoons. But it's just great to see that like this movie kind of follows that that phased approach of the monster, where it keeps getting more and more insane as we keep screwing it up.
Yeah. And like that idea of asking those questions, like you were talking about earlier, like, oh, what's midnight, and all these things, like, the movie is so sort of self-referential and all that stuff, and how they even, they kill Leonard Maltin for giving them a bad review on the first one, and like
that was so good.
All these like moments where it's just like, it's making sure that that you're not allowed to sort of like pick this apart or think of it seriously in those terms.
The break in the movie where it was like gremlins have taken over the picture and you could see their shadows in the projector screen.
Oh, yeah.
And then Hulk Hogan has to tell them to stop fucking with the movie. I'm sure that was a little bit more effective in theater, but still a fun gag.
Well, on VHS they had a different one where John Wayne would yell at you, or yell at the Gremlins anyway, to get the movie back to go.
So there were multiple versions of that.
Yeah, and I think on the Blu-ray they have the VHS one where it's like the same. It would be the same scene, but like it would start with like a tracking problem, and then and it would go to static, and then the Gremlins would be screwing up and stuff. But man, speaking of like little connections, whatever, obviously this movie had the redheaded twins in both this and Terminator, but also like, man, so there's something about Clamp's office that reminded me a lot of Cyberdyne.
Interesting.
And there was the scene where Phoebe Cates or whatever her name is gets trapped in the elevator, and like the Gremlins are sort of breaking it down or whatever, and that's kind of similar to T2 with like the elevator horror in that movie. And I don't know why, but like for some reason the Marathon Man scene with the dentist gremlin, is it safe? Like maybe because it was just on a real wide angle and the dentist gremlin was just like really up into the camera. It reminded me a little of the like, who's laughing now? Like in Evil Dead.
That's right. Who's laughing now? Who's laughing now?
I mean, I think that Dante and Raimi are very similar, especially watching these two movies back to back. They're like very they're into cartoons clearly, or love cartoons, and they were trying to create more of a cartoony vibe in camera or with practical effects, and I think both were successful in their own way.
And it's an interesting study in contrast between these two. It's like, like you said, that both these guys have a very similar, set of sensibilities, from, both, classic horror movies to also, just, Three Stooges and, zany cartoons and those kind of stuff and that kind of humor. And it's interesting to see how both of them took, what is, again, a sort of straight horror movies and then turn them into horror comedies. And, Evil Dead 2 is a little more on the horror side than the horror comedy, and Gremlins is way more on the comedy than the horror part of it. But, it's still in there.
Yeah, Gremlins didn't shy away from some pretty gross effects. The brain gremlin dying at the end is one of the grossest things.
Yeah.
New York.
All that stuff is like glooping out of him. Yeah.
And that's right when the SWAT team then comes in, and the one SWAT guy shoots the thing, and he's like, "It moves, sir." That's Dean Norris.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, when I saw it, I'm like, "That's not Dean Norris, is it?" I waited for the
Dean
credits.
Norris was the same guy who, like, Joe Morton was like, "I don't know how much longer I can hold this up," and he's like, "Get out of here!" That was Dean Norris too.
Go back! Everybody out! Go back now!
Dean Norris is in T2 and see, there was a reason that we put all these films together. Dean Norris.
We didn't even know it, but there was a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, that's right. He's the SWAT guy. He's like, "Get back!"
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that said, "It moves, sir." He just
That was
blasts,
him?
like,
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I got to look that up. It's a good one.
What's happening? It moves, sir. All right, carry on.
Oh, I thought you were going to bring up, like, as soon as Clamp charges in, he's like, "Oh," like he slips in the fucking goo and goes sliding. Oh, man. Lost it.
Glover is awesome in this movie.
I know.
He kind of stole that one for me.
It's true. It really is kind of his movie. It's
He
like
has an arc, right? Like he's
Yeah.
he's kind of like the invisible boss that no one sees, and then all of a sudden he starts making more appearances. Because gets a heart, learns about what Kingston Falls is, and he's like, "This is what people want." Clamp corners.
Well,
Where life comes to a crawl or something like that.
yes, what seems like a revelation that and it's funny, like this one, I feel like it's sort of tricking your emotions into feeling like he turned the corner or whatever, but he's actually just the exact same as he was earlier. It's just that, like, he's training his sights as opposed to what was the, like, we make the Orientals better or whatever.
Where China gets oriented.
Where China gets oriented instead of where China gets oriented. It's where life comes to a crawl or whatever.
Clamp
it's like
corners.
It's still
life
the
comes
same,
to a
like,
crawl.
bad idea of
Right.
like.
But it's all marketing, right? Everything that
Yeah.
comes to his mind, it's like it has to be this big tagline, and like you can see the whole development, and
Yeah.
it's interesting. But
Well, and everything is sort of a joke to him. Everything is sort of like
yeah.
well, how do I spend my time? I have nothing to do, and I'm just like da 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 da.
Could we start writing some memos? Let's go write some
Yeah,
memos.
exactly. That scene where he's just like looking around, like nothing to do, nothing to do. Well, how about we write memos? Right? And like, and it's the same thing. He like just impulsively decides, I'm gonna make Kingston Falls where life turns to a crawl. And he's like, well, what about this? He's like, yep. And he like walks away.
Yeah.
And like, it's like,
No,
but,
he
but,
said
but we
he's-
see what his creations are, which is like this total dystopian building of like nothing works and everything's horrible, and what his vision for Chinatown would also be horrible. I'm sure what his Kingston Falls would be a
that last thing
dystopian
that you were
hellhole.
talking about was he saw Gizmo, and he's like, you know what I see? Animals with suction cups looking out the back door or back windows.
Yeah.
And he's like, we might have to lose the headband. He's like, he likes the headband. We're flexible, Pete. And he
Yeah.
walks away.
You know what I imagine his Kingston Falls would be the the like underground town from A Boy and His Dog, where it's just like a simulation of what a small town Andy
Right.
Griffith life would be, but just right underneath this like very paper thin surface is just pure horror and like
Apocalypse above.
apocalypse. Yeah.
That's an interesting movie that we should probably talk about. I've never seen that movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's pretty good. Like the short story is awesome, but the movie does a pretty decent job of it.
Right on. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our triple feature of sequels that are arguably better than the first. We were talking about Terminator 2, Evil Dead 2, and Gremlins 2. And this was really fun to unpack because these were really fun to rewatch.
I think you misspoke. You didn't say definitely. You said arguably.
No, Evil Dead 2, definitely. Gremlins 2, I'm starting to feel definitely. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, somewhat right, but arguably,
Okay.
Terminator is better than T2. So next,
We're going to have to edit that to say
T2 is better than Terminator.
See, he said it.
All right, so that sums up today's triple feature of Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Gremlins 2, The New Batch. What a very fun discussion this was. Next episode, we have a similar episode, which we're calling First Drafts. That's going to include LA Takedown, The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original version, which we spoke about the remake, and El Mariachi. And in a way, these are all remakes from the same director who directed the first one. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. It would be the idea is just to kind of go through, people revising their own work, essentially. Also, the idea was that like the second one was more famous, and so you know what those remakes were, but maybe not so much what the first drafts were.
Right on. All right, so that was the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster. Thanks so much for listening. Follow and subscribe and listen. We'll see you next week.
Ciao.
That's an unauthorized break period, my friend. You're gone. Terminated. End of medical benefits. That's right. Clean out the desk, 1 hour.
Alert personnel, we have a career opportunity in level 7.